Welcome back. Described as weapons that never stop killing, they almost always leave behind a long-lasting trail of suffering for civilians long after the conflict has ended. Over the past 60 years, cluster bombs have been used in about 17 countries, including Vietnam, Cambodia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq and Lebanon. The International Committee of the Red Cross says some 400 million people in those countries live in disguised minefields. At least 13,000 civilians have been killed or injured by these bombs in recent years. About a third of the victims are children who are attracted to the brightly colored bomblets. Following September the 11th, the US dropped hundreds of cluster bombs containing yellow bomblets in Afghanistan. Those that failed to explode were later mistaken for the yellow food packs airdropped by the US to feed hungry children. Joining us again are our guests in Dublin, Yasmin Ergas, also in Dublin, Raed Muqallad, and in Tel Aviv, Miron Rapoport. Yasmin, the United States of America, which is not taking part in the conference, is saying that a ban on the cluster bombs would hinder the humanitarian efforts undertaken by the Americans across the world. What was your reaction at Human Rights Watch to this justification presented by the Americans?
Frankly, I don't understand it at all. I really just don't understand it. I can't see how banning cluster munitions would hinder humanitarian efforts. I think that you don't normally bomb your way with cluster bombs into providing relief. I think that the problem is actually to observe international humanitarian law, which bans precisely these kinds of instruments of warfare.
Because Americans have been saying that if this law has been implemented, then the Americans would not be able to move their mobile units and ships which are equipped sometimes with cluster bombs to undertake humanitarian works, and they would be liable in face of the international law.
Yes, but the United States knows how to distinguish and to segregate various kinds of munitions. It's true, I think, that from the point of view of the American equipment, it would take a considerable effort to be able to adhere to the rules that are established by the treaty in terms of the stockpiling and the equipment of its and the use of its military equipment, its various vehicles. On the other hand, the fundamental purpose of this treaty is to ban, in the first place, the use, the transfer, the stockpiling, etc. And I think that all of these objectives can be addressed through appropriate logistical strategies. So frankly, I don't see that as a very convincing argument.
Some of the countries that have decided not, and let me go now to Miron, not to take part in the conference have voiced some concerns. The Israelis and others were saying that we are using very sophisticated weaponry with low failure rates. As somebody who has been writing on this issue, do you subscribe to what the Israelis have been saying about this issue, that they are using very sophisticated cluster bombs?
In the last war, in the Lebanese war, the second Lebanese war, Israel used several millions of bomblets. Mainly, they were from American manufacturers, and the failure rates there was very, very high. So at least in the last war, Israel used what we can say a very dirty type of cluster munition. The Israeli military industries do produce cluster munition which they claim are much safer with a much lower failure rate. The UN is saying that is not so sure that the failure rate that the Israelis are claiming is correct. They say that from what they found in Lebanon, because Israel did use some Israeli manufactured munition there, that the failure rate of the Israeli manufacturers were much higher than Israeli claimed.
Well, I've been personally to the...
At least at this moment, so at least at this moment, I don't see the Israeli stockpiles and the Israeli what it has in use is not very sophisticated.
All right. I've been personally to the south of Lebanon just a few days after the last, the 2006 war, and I've seen the whole area littered with cluster bombs. It took some farmers months to be able to go back to their farms, and one of these cluster bombs killed the son of Raed. Muqallad, let me go back to you. You've been talking about these cluster bombs designed in a way to deceive people. They are mistaken sometimes by kids as food packs or toys.
Yes.
What's your feeling when you listen to the Americans, the Israelis, the Pakistanis, the Indians, the Russians, the Chinese saying that we cannot abandon manufacturing these weapons because they are extremely important for our national security?
You know something. Everything in these countries, they said that this is our national security. I don't know how the national security of USA. It's been in South Lebanon, and Israel dropped more than 4 million cluster munition, cluster bombs. This is the estimated of United Nations. I don't know what that means. They said that this is our national security and that they dropped cluster bombs in South Lebanon, and the most affected of cluster bombs there is the farmers and the children. This is the first thing. And the second thing, they produce something like a toy, and as we know, the toy, it's more attractive for our children. This is give us an idea about what this country want to do for our children in all,
I got your point, right.
or another children in all the world.
Yasmin, once this draft law becomes, after being signed and then ratified by the legislative bodies of these countries, one of its goals is to meet the 5-year target of cleaning up all these countries of their cluster bomb stockpiles. Is it a little bit exaggerated in the sense that we know that, according to some estimates, there are billions of cluster bombs in the world. It's time-consuming and it's costly to just destroy them.
You know, it's an ambitious target, but I don't know what the point of targets is unless they're ambitious. We're dealing with something that we need to get rid of. We need to be able to put an end to the use of these kinds of weapons. And frankly, I think it's feasible. We do a great many things that are expensive, that are time-consuming, that require great determination, and this seems to me as good an objective as any that we can come up with. And so I don't think that that's the basic problems. There are provisions in all of, there can always be provisions for making it a bit easier for countries to meet their requirements, but I don't think that that's the major issue.
Miran, how can a country like Israel juggle both issues? The fact that they will go now in history as one of the countries which are against the ban on cluster bombs, stigmatized now by the Dublin Conference, and on the other hand, the need that we need to maintain military superiority, and therefore we have to use cluster bombs.
No, I don't really think that anyone, although Israel is still saying that cluster munition is needed, I don't think really someone in Israel is seriously claiming that the use of cluster munition is necessary to achieve military superiority. Israel do have other weapons, much more sophisticated, much more effective than cluster munition, much more precise, that it can use. It can use to kill people. It's not something very humanitarian in itself, but anyhow, I don't really think that cluster munition is needed to military superiority.
Let me go very briefly to Raed Muqallad. Raed, you lost your son. Now with Dublin apparently adopting the ban on cluster bombs, do you feel like that you have won the war? The war of changing the minds of people about cluster bombs?
Yes, yes, of course. If this treaty it's come through, it's good. It's good.
Yasmin Ergas and Raed Muqallad from Dublin and Miron Rappaport from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much indeed for your contribution, and thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Goodbye for now.